Oh, our August 4th, Bowling Green, Warren County Planning Commission into order. And McKenna, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Commissioner Drain.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Gay.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Graham.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Starks.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Vitale.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Volkert.
Yes, ma'am.
And Chair Warren.
Yes, ma'am. Commissioners, you had the minutes for our July 21st, 2022 meeting in your packet. Are there any questions? If not, McKenna, would you ask for a motion and the roll call?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Commissioner Vitale.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Volkert.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Drain. Commissioner Gay.
Abstain.
And Commissioner Graham.
Yes, ma'am.
And Chair Warren.
Yes, ma'am. The motion's approved. We enter now into our public hearing. Mr. Moore, if you would call the witnesses to this meeting.
Yes, sir. Warren, I request that you order that the record include all relevant statutory and regulatory provisions, the commission's entire file for each application on tonight's docket. The qualifications for the two staff witnesses. Also, if you would please administer the oath to those witnesses.
I'll swear to tell the truth. Yes, sir. Mr. Peterson, it's good to have you here tonight. Would you introduce our newest member to the commission?
Sure. This is Jenny Willoughby. She's our planner one, new here in our office.
Welcome.
We'll be glad to have you. All right. We had our subdivision and site development plans in your packet. Are there any questions? Hearing none, then we will move forward. Is there any old business, Mr. Peterson?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Our first item tonight is 2022 50Z County Lexington Station LLC, care of Kelly Arnold, Steve Harlan, and John Huggins have filed an application to rezone a tract of land containing approximately 41.582 acres located at 0 Dillard Road from Ag to RS1A, single-family residential with a general development plan. Ms. Hurd?
Thank you, Chair Warren. We had a pre-application meeting in June for the properties you just outlined on Dillard Road. Excuse me. The properties are zoned agriculture currently, with a use also of agriculture. The future land use map is low-density residential. Sorry, I choked on my water right before we came over. I think it's
COVID.
still
It's
lingering
called
in there.
COVID.
No, it's not, I promise. So the low-density residential future land use category comprises areas designated for single-family detached development and attached single-family development, including twin homes, where each unit is platted on its own individual lot with gross densities ranging from 0 to 4.5 dwelling units per acre. Looking at the proposed layout, if it will, oh, there we go. Okay, the applicants are proposing to develop a maximum of 84 lots for single-family residential use. All of the lots would be served by internal streets with one entrance on Dillard Road and one on Bettersworth Road. Looking at the natural features, if we go back to the aerial view, you'll see in the aerial that there are a mature line of trees along the western property line and also running through central portions of the larger tract. The applicants did not agree to preserve any of the existing trees, but did agree to plant a minimum of 2 trees in their development plan conditions. We have included a density map for your reference. I don't think it made it on the PowerPoint, but that's okay. It's on page, let's see here, 13. And you'll see on this map that densities in the area range from 0.44 dwelling units per acre to 1.01 dwelling units per acre. The proposed density for this development is 2.02 dwelling units per acre. Jumping over to the proposed development plan conditions on page 3. Number 1 requires that all service utility lines be located underground. 2 limits the development to a maximum of 84 lots. 3 outlines permitted materials for the exterior facades of principal structures. 4 requires a minimum home size of 2,250 square feet to also include a 2-car garage. 5 requires that each lot be developed with at least 2 trees. 6 requires that residences on lots contiguous to Dillard Road and Bettersworth Road be screened with vegetation consisting of a minimum of 6 evergreens and 3 deciduous trees per 100 linear feet. Next, we have a requirement for uniform street lighting. After that, you'll see a requirement for sidewalks on both sides of interior streets. Number 9 outlines some roadway improvements that I'll touch on in just a second. 10 requires that the development include restrictive covenants and mandatory membership in a homeowners association. And 11 addresses sinkholes. On page 4, you'll see a reference to section 314 of the zoning ordinance, which outlines the requirements for a traffic impact study. And a traffic impact study was not required by the Warren County Public Works Department in lieu of the following items. The first is that access will be limited to a single point on Dillard Road, and that a connection to Bettersworth Road is required. And Dillard Road will be widened to provide a right turn lane and a continuous left turn approximately 150 feet in each direction from the entrance plus taper. Under the Focus 2030 category review, the staff evaluated 15 items and found 6 of those items to be in compliance. There were 3 out of compliance and 6 for the Planning Commission to evaluate for compliance. So we'll touch on a few of those, the first being LU 1.1.3, which looks at compatibility. Next, LU 2, which addresses quality of development and character of the area. Next, LU 211, which looks at open space. The applicants committed to include sidewalks on both sides of the streets, but did not agree to any additional open space outside of the minimum 50% required per lot in the proposed RS1A zone, and the Planning Commission should determine if this is adequate and usable, and if it is of scenic or ecological value. Next, LU 214, PR 1.7, and NCR 1.1.6, which address preservation of existing vegetation, and again, the applicants did not agree to preserve any of the existing vegetation on the property. On page 5, we have a few more. NCR 4, which looks at the agricultural landscape and view shed along Dillard Road. And then last, HN 2.1 and HN 4, which look at the location of the proposed development and whether or not it's suitable, and if the proposed development will enhance the array of housing options in the area. With that, I will wrap up with our points to consider on page 1. The staff found that the application complies with the majority of the criteria assist in the review process, with considerations noted regarding preservation of existing vegetation, open space, and the current road width for Bettersworth Road. And then the last 2, I think we've already touched on. Again, no requirement for preserving existing vegetation. However, the applicants did agree to plant 2 trees per lot. And then last deals with the open space that's proposed for the development. I think that is all for the staff report, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Hurt. Commissioners, any questions for Rachel?
So Rachel, refresh my memory on requirements for open space. So are sidewalks on both sides a requirement?
Sidewalks are actually only required on one side of the street, unless it's classified, I believe, as a through street. Ben may correct me if I'm wrong. And that if it's classified as a through street, it's required on both sides, but just the side streets or the lower volume roads are only required to have them on one side.
And so are the sidewalks on both streets why did they agree to sidewalks on both sides of the street? Rather than, is that some attempt to deal with open space or walkability inside the neighborhood?
They may want to address that here in just a little bit, but it's my understanding that that was one of the reasons that they included that as a commitment.
And if you could, help me on the density. What did you say the density was for this development?
2.02 dwelling units per acre.
And that is sewer, correct?
Sorry, and that is, oh, yes, sewer development, yes,
And so is all of the summit sewer?
yes.
Okay. So,
Yeah, we can go back, I think you can see it on the edge of the zoning map here. That light yellow color is the summit, that's RS1A zone, which is also the zoning that's requested for this property.
this may just be an illusion, so help me here. On the summit, if I look at, for example, I can hardly read this, but I think it's Pikes Peak Way, for example. There seems to be a higher density in that section than there would be, say, on Grand Teton Way. Is that two different phases, or what's happening there?
Yeah, those are different phases. So on your density map on page 13, the density for the summit is calculated at roughly 1 dwelling unit per acre, but that would take into account both the larger lots and these smaller lots, and so that's an overall density. But if you were to look at the different phases, you'd be correct in saying that the phase on the west side is more dense than the original phase on the right.
Good. That's all I have. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. Mr. Volker?
But Rachel, really, the 50% is really probably not that big of a deal because most of these lots are quarter acre or bigger, which would mean 12,000 feet or 11,000 feet, and putting a 2,000 to 3,000 foot house on it's going to be plenty of open space.
Yeah, you would have to have at least 50%, which, like you said, would be at least 6,000
Yeah,
square feet
foot
per lot.
houses. Yeah, so, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Volker. Mr. Graham. Commissioners, any other questions for Ms. Hurd? Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, sir.
Is the applicant or the representative here tonight?
Good evening, Chairman. Tad Pardue, 1010 College Street. I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you, Mr. Burt.
Yeah, good evening, Chairman. Good evening, members of the commission. Rachel, the slides that I had sent you, are they queued up? Do I just keep going? Okay. While she's doing that, Commissioner Graham, real quickly as to your question about sidewalks, yes, that was a means through which the applicants were attempting to sort of address the open space issue. Commissioner Volker brought up a good point as well, and that is these are RS1A lots, bigger lots, more room to build. So there's that issue as well. And then with the sidewalks, there will be adjacent to this property across Dillard Road, eventually an elementary school. So the idea with sidewalks on both sides of the street would be an enhancement and I guess an encouragement for folks with their children to walk to school safer when that school is built. Yeah.
So Tad,
Yeah.
Tad,
Yeah,
to
let's
me,
do that.
just the easiest question is, why wouldn't you just go ahead and agree to the minimum 50%? Because it's not going to be a problem.
Well, it's already required.
Yeah, so, okay.
Yeah, I don't know that it's necessary in a development plan
Okay.
condition because it's a
Okay.
requirement
Okay.
anyways.
Okay, you've answered the question for me as well.
Yeah,
We don't have
okay.
to state it because it's already
That's
required.
correct.
Is that
Okay.
correct?
Correct.
I see.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Thanks, Christian.
Just a few things I'd like to mention. Most of you all probably recognize this property, came before the commission last year. I thought it worthwhile for those of you that may not remember the particulars, and then obviously we have, I think, some new commissioners, just to point out to you all a few of the differences this time around. Obviously, this is a new application. These are different applicants. These are different developers. Mr. Harlan, Steve Harlan, Kelly Arnold, they're here this evening. They're local builders, successful builders. They've been here in Warren County for some time. I have some photographs as well to show some of the homes that they've built, just to give you all an idea of what this development, how it would appear if it were approved. But the slide in front of you will show a comparison of some significant items from last year as opposed to this year, and you'll see Zoning-wise, when this came before you the first time, the applicant sought an RS1B zone. We're here tonight requesting an RS1A zone. What does that mean? That means larger lots. That means less lot coverage. That means larger lot setbacks. Again, tying back into that sort of open space point that Commissioner Volkert made. Maximum number of lots and density. I went back and reviewed the video from the hearing before this commission on the application last year. A consistent theme, both with opposition and the commissioners at that time, was number of houses, density, and minimum house size. In an attempt to address all of those, you'll see the maximum lots on this application versus the application that was before you last year is a 28% reduction from 116 to 84. You'll see how much of a difference the density is from what was brought before you last year to now. It was almost 3 dwelling units per acre to now essentially 2. And then you'll see the minimum home size. You might recall there being some discussion with the applicants last year about minimum home size. There was even, I think, a request on the floor for them to raise that. I think they agreed to take it up to 1,800, but wouldn't go any further. We've agreed to a minimum home size of 2,250 square feet. I bring that to your attention only because it is in excess of the minimum home size in the Summit. It is in excess of the minimum home size in Claiborne Farms, and it is in excess of the minimum home size in Spindletop. Those are the 3 developments closest to this in terms of distance. In terms of other items in our development plan conditions, I do want to point out that in terms of building materials, we have committed to exterior building materials not involving vinyl except soffits and trim. The Summit allows up to 15% of the exterior of structures to be built in vinyl. Both Spindletop and Claiborne Farms actually permit vinyl as a building material. And then I mentioned earlier the school. Warren County Schools does own the property across Dillard Road. I guess it would be to the north. It would sort of sit between this property and the Summit. We have been in communication with the school district throughout the development of this proposed plan, and they are in agreement. They have seen the access point on Dillard Road. They are fine with that where it is. In other words, when it comes time to develop a school, they don't have any issue with lining up their main entrance with the entrance to this subdivision. And then, of course, again, the sidewalks on both sides of the street was something that the school had some input on and encouraged as well. It's compliant with the flume, obviously. Low-density residential, this fits squarely within. As to the density of 2 compared to the surrounding developments, Commissioner Graham, you stole my point in that what's being developed out there right now is phase 2. I think it's phase 2, maybe it's phase 3 of the Summit. And if you draw a comparison between that phase of the Summit and this proposed development, the densities are much, much closer. We'll entertain any questions. Brian Shirley is here. He's the engineer on the project. I have all 3 applicants here if anyone has any questions of them.
Thank you, Tad. Commissioners, any other questions for Mr. Pardue?
Mr. Perdue, are there any water issues or drainage issues related to this particular site?
So I don't believe there are any drainage issues. There is is it a spring, Brian? There's a spring on the property. Mr. Shirley has assured us that his engineering firm can sufficiently address that issue. If you'd like to know the specifics about that, I'll need an engineer to talk instead of a lawyer, and I can have him come up here. Otherwise, as far as runoff and drainage, no.
Okay. I didn't see anything about it in the development plans, reason I asked the question.
Ed, I commend you on a good application of addressing a lot of things that we sit here a lot of times and ask for and talk about. And so, I know you come down here sometimes and get beat up sometimes, but I commend you on what looks to be a great application.
This is well put together. Real quickly, let's go to, the school is going to be across the street, and maybe staff can speak to this. Are the road improvements scheduled because of the school?
He actually may be better to answer that,
That's
but
all
I'll
right.
start and then he can correct me. So none scheduled.
Right.
But anytime a school goes in, the state, I think Department of Education and Transportation Cabinet decide what improvements need to be made. So I think it's safe to say that there will be some improvements required when the school goes in.
So Tad, I assume you're about to tell me, have you guys been coordinating with those possible improvements for your development here?
Well, so, there were no improvements recommended for this development beyond those that Rachel spoke to in the staff report, which the applicants have agreed. Prior to the school district purchasing this property, they had to have a representative from the Kentucky Department of Education come down to Bowling Green and view the property as a potential location for an elementary school. There's been communication between KDE and the school district about the fact that some improvement will need to be made and be required when and if the school is developed there. So the school district fully anticipates that that'll have to be done. I know they've had preliminary conversations with County Public Works and even some with the State Department of Transportation about how all that's going to be arranged. And then it was brought to our attention through the pre-app and the application process also that Bettersworth is, I think, scheduled for some improvements by the county, which was part of the impetus for requesting that we create an access point there, because originally we only had access on Dillard, but it was at the county's request that we do Bettersworth, because I think that is on the schedule to be approved, if I understand correctly.
So is it safe for us to say that there are no conflicts with entrances that would conflict with the school's future plans? If those were there, I assume that state would have notified you by this time, correct?
Yes, and I had a conversation with school district representatives actually this week, one more time. Hey, will you look at this one more time and check it out and make sure you don't have any issues with our entrance point? And they said it was no problem.
Thank you, Tad.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ted. Commissioners, any other questions for Mr. Pardue? Thank you, Ted, for your time.
Thank you, Chairman.
And your applicants. Is there anyone in the audience tonight that has a question about this application? Yes, sir. If you would come to the microphone and state your name and address, please, sir.
I'm David Hunt.
David Hunt.
Yep,
And your address, Mr. Hunt?
1558 Rich Pond Road.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt.
I just came down here to, not in opposition. I farm pretty well all around this development. The Bettersworth Road is a concern of mine. I didn't know whether there had been any concrete plans on widening it or paving it, or, because there's going to be a lot of cut through on Bettersworth Road when this subdivision goes in. I think that's the reason I came down here. I'm not here to oppose it, but I am concerned about the traffic on Bettersworth Road.
Thank you, David. Ms. Hertz got an answer to your question.
So I talked to our Public Works Director earlier today, Josh Moore, because I anticipated this question may be coming up. And he said that Warren County is planning for improvements to Bettersworth Road, including widening and paving. However, there's not a definitive timeline as to when those improvements would be made, and that it would likely be done in phases.
Not before this subdivision, more than likely, goes in.
Didn't get that impression, no, because he said there's no definitive timeline at this point.
I've been talking about improving that road for a long time, so that's all I got.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt. Is there anyone else that has a comment regarding this request tonight? Thank you, David. Commissioners, hearing no other requests from the audience, would call for a motion for this motion tonight.
I'll make a motion to approve the proposed zoning map amendment together with condition upon the general development plan, docket number 2022-50Z County. Based upon the testimony and documents presented in this public hearing, the proposed zoning map amendment is consistent with the adopted Focus 2030 comprehensive plan, as demonstrated by its compliance with the objectives and action items presented in the staff report. Therefore, the proposed zoning map amendment is in agreement with the adopted comprehensive plan. Further, I request that this motion include a summary of evidence and testimony presented by the witnesses at this public hearing.
Second.
Commissioner Graham,
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Starks,
Yes.
Commissioner Vitale,
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Volkert,
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Drain, Commissioner Gay,
Yes, ma'am.
and Chair Warren.
Yes, ma'am. The motion has been approved and will go to the Warren County Fiscal Court for final approval. Our next item tonight is 2022-51Z County, Tom and Portia Pennington. Am I saying it right, Tom? Portia, excuse me, all right. Tom and Portia Pennington have filed an application to rezone a tract of land containing approximately 2.5 acres located on the western side of the intersection at Scottsville Road and Magnum Road from agriculture to highway business with a general development plan. And here we go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We had a pre-application meeting on April the 20th for the property that you mentioned, and that is highlighted in yellow. The current zoning is agriculture. Current land use is vacant, and the future land use is commercial. The applicants have supplied a couple of exhibits there in your packet, and they are displayed on the screen. So just to summarize, the applicants are applying to rezone 2.52 acres in order to develop a multi-tenant building with a mixture of office and retail uses. Looking over at the site characteristics review, the concept depicts one multiple tenant building with some parking out front and in the setback along Scottsville Road. Setbacks will adhere to the requirements in the HB zone, including a 40-foot setback adjacent to any single-family use. There is an existing 45-foot front yard established by way of plat, but no requirement in the DCPs require that the 45-foot front yard setback be maintained as is currently platted. Wastewater the property is within 2,000 feet public sanitary sewer and will be served by sewer if this application is approved. Prime farmland, the entirety of the property contains a soil type designated as prime farmland. And to summarize, this application complies with the majority of the items in the site characteristics review, with considerations noted regarding the location of parking, front setback along Scottsville Road, and prime farmland. Looking at the design, the site design and compatibility review, building materials, majority of the structures in the area have exteriors comprised mainly of brick, stone, or cementitious siding. There are a few structures that incorporate wood and vinyl. Surrounding building foundations are mainly comprised of brick or stone. DPC number 8 requires that the building be constructed of comparable materials. Looking at signage, staff has noted that very little freestanding signage exists in this section of Scottsville Road. DPC number 3 prohibits LED signage and restricts freestanding signage to be a monument style with a maximum height of 20 feet and a maximum sign-faced area of 100 square feet. There are also recommendations relating to signage outlined below for the Scottsville Road Corridor Study and Plano Focal Point Plan. The DPC as proposed does not comply with the applicable Plano Focal Point plan policy. Looking down to proposed open space, the applicant stated in DPC number 5 that at least 20% of the property will be devoted to green space, which is exceeding the 10% requirement for the proposed highway business zone. So looking down at applicable plans, Staff reviewed the Scottsville Road corridor study and the focal point plan. I'll highlight a few of these for you. Staff evaluated 9 for the Scottsville Road corridor study, but looking at number 4, addressing the building materials. The Planning Commission should determine compliance with this recommendation. That area. Looking at number 5, which addresses signage. Of course, as I mentioned, DPC number 3 prohibits LED signage and lists the committed signage there, and the Planning Commission should determine if this complies with the policy recommendation. Looking at number 6, a requirement that either no parking be allowed in the building setback along Scottsville Road. The concept depicts parking in front of the setback, front of the building setback along Scottsville Road. The applicants also did not provide a DPC regarding parking location. The proposal therefore does not comply with this recommendation. And then looking down at number 9, as far as open space and green space or greenway connection, the applicants did not address the construction of any bicycle or pedestrian facilities, and the Planning Commission should determine compliance with this recommendation. Now looking at the Plano focal point plan, staff evaluated 6 policies, and I will just touch on a few of them. PL3 addresses building orientation and setback. Again, DPC number 8 did not address setbacks, and the Planning Commission should determine if this complies with the policy recommendation. Looking at PL6, consideration should be given to the existing pattern of development in the surrounding area, including building setbacks along the existing roadways. Applicants did not address the building setback along Scottsville Road, and therefore does not comply. Looking at PL10, which addresses signage, the application does not comply with this policy. With that. Moving along to the development plan conditions. Number 1, all service utility lines will be located underground. Number 2, the property shall be developed with 1 access point to Scottsville Road, the location of which will be approved by KYTC. The property shall have no access to Magnum Road. Number 3, the property shall, again, that's the signage that we have previously discussed. Number 4, roof level HVAC, electrical transformers, and similar facilities shall be screened from public view. Number 5 addresses that green space, that open space area. Number 6, no building on the property shall be constructed to exceed 2 stories in height. Building area shall not exceed 14,000 square feet per story. Number 7 is lists the prohibited uses on the property. Number 8 addresses building orientation and as well as materials. Number 9, any outdoor storage shall be located to the rear of the building. Number 10 addresses sinkholes. Number 11 addresses hours of operation. Businesses on the property shall not be open to the public prior to 6 a.m. or after 11 p.m. And number 12 addresses the mature trees there. And number 13, garbage collection areas shall be screened with the same materials as facades of the principal building. Looking down at the Focus 3020 category review, staff evaluated 14 items, and I will just highlight a few. The property is designated as commercial on the flume. The proposed HB zone is a potential compatible zone in this flume category. So the application does comply with LU 1.1.1 and LU 1.1.2. But the Planning Commission should determine if the proposal is compatible with the surrounding area, including the proposed front building setback along Scottsville Road, location of proposed parking and signage, and if the application therefore complies with LU 1.1.3. The Planning Commission should determine compliance with LU2, should determine if the proposed development is high-quality development that includes design standards, tailored to preserve the character of the area. Planning Commission should determine compliance with LU 2.8. The application complies with just over half of the applicable items in the Scottsville Road Corridor Study and the Plano Focal Point Plan. 3 of the items were deemed to be out of compliance, with several others to be assessed for compliance by the Planning Commission. The proposal may comply with HN 1 and 1.3. Planning Commission should determine if the proposed development, including the proposed uses, location of structures, location of parking and signage, will maintain or improve the existing character, pattern of development in the area, and if it will strengthen nearby neighborhoods and districts. And lastly, the Planning Commission should determine compliance with ED1 and if the proposal will help attract new businesses to the area, particularly those that will diversify the local economy. Looking back at points to consider, a majority of the property is classified as prime farmland. Very little freestanding signage exists in this section of Scottsville Road. The DPCs prohibit LED signage and restricts freestanding signage to a monument style with a maximum height of 20 feet and a maximum sign face area of 100 square feet. The proposed signage exceeds the 8 feet height and 75 square feet face area requirements in the Plano Focal Point Plan. Very little commercial parking exists in this area of Scottsville Road. The applicants are proposing to locate parking for commercial uses in front of the building. And there is an existing platted 45-foot front yard setback. Other properties in proximity to the proposed development located on the same side of Scottsville Road have platted front setbacks ranging from 40 to 50 feet or are already developed where the existing building is at least 50 feet from the front property line. There is no requirement that the applicants maintain the existing setback as platted. That is all we have for a staff report, but be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions?
Question, Amy? Development plan, item number 4, roof level HVAC. Do we know how the screening will be? Will it be trees, evergreens? What type of screening will it be? Maybe that's a question for the
Yeah, I don't know if we know that entirely, that they might have to address how they plan on doing that since they committed to that.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
A couple of questions, if I may, and this may be generally for staff as well. So let's go to the sign for a moment. The sign is out of compliance with the focal point plan. Am I understanding that correctly? Okay. And so what would the applicant have to do to gain compliance there? Is that something in the DPC that is the size of the sign? Got it. Okay, very good. So we can talk with the applicant about that. Let's go to parking, because that was the other one that you mentioned, parking in front of the structure. We've zoned a few more properties out there. I'm just thinking of there's like a coffee place but they have parking in the front. So help me understand, is this different or a different requirement, or is it something we just allowed?
It's not a different requirement, but as you all may know, with each rezoning application, it's not uncommon to where an application may not comply 100% with every single applicable item. So each of you individually will have to place the weight you feel is appropriate in making your decision on how much that particular item matters compared to all of the other items.
Got it, okay. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. Commissioners, any other questions? Amy? Is the applicant here or their representative? We are, Chairman. You've been sworn in, Mr. Purdue.
Thank you. I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicants, Tom and Portia Pennington. Mr. Pennington is here this evening with me and is available for questions if we need him to answer some. Want to point out a couple things. The issue of parking and setbacks in particular. A lot of thought went into those issues when preparing the concept plan and the proposed development plan here. And what I want to bring to you all's attention in that regard is there is a 45-foot setback on the plat. However, if you look at how this property is configured in relation to Scottsville Road, there is 60 feet between the right-of-way on Scottsville Road, which starts at the sidewalk, and the property line, 60 feet before you even get to the property. As it is depicted on the concept plan, the building itself, the structure, well, let me start with parking. The parking lot sits 10 feet back from the property line. So there isn't any parking for 70 feet from the right-of-way, the sidewalk at Scottsville Road, to the parking lot as it's depicted on the concept plan. The building itself, the structure as it's depicted on the concept plan, is a little over 70 feet from the property line. So as it is depicted, this building, when developed, would be over 130 feet in distance from the right-of-way on Scottsville Road. Obviously, had the property sat closer to Scottsville Road and we have the setback issue, it could have been reconfigured. But with that distance, and we went down, up and down Scottsville Road and were challenged to find any commercial structure or structure period, for that matter, that was any further distance from the right-of-way at Scottsville Road than this one. So it is unique in that, you know, we have these recommendations and we have this setback platted, but as it is depicted here and were it approved and developed this way, then again, we're looking at a structure that sits 130 feet from the right-of-way of Scottsville Road, in addition to, on average, 10 feet higher than Scottsville Road. So as it relates to parking and the structure itself, it would actually appear even farther off of Scottsville Road than it actually is, which is a considerable distance itself, simply because of the height. So I wanted to point that out because I think, you know, unless you go visit and see the property and how it sits and how it lies in relation to Scottsville Road, it's hard it's hard to understand. But that is the reason why we did not address setbacks in our development plan conditions, because again, you gotta go 60 feet from the sidewalk on Scottsville Road to the property line, and you know, we've got parking 10 feet off. So so that's the reason that setbacks weren't specifically addressed in the development plan conditions. Parking in front, again, one of the commissioners, I think Commissioner Graham pointed out, even some of the newer or more recent approved developments, the commercial development that includes the Q Coffee Shop has parking in the front. The Peachtree commercial development that includes the Sheldon's Pharmacy, it has parking in the front. You can see here we have as much or more parking in the rear, but again, that parking is going to sit considerably higher than Scottsville Road, and that parking lot is going to be at least 70 feet from Scottsville Road, so its visibility will be limited for those folks who are traveling up and down Scottsville Road. This is 2.5 acres. It's clearly designated in the future land use map as commercial. As you get further south, it transitions to more of a mixed use. But it's an area of growth. Commercial and residential is clearly envisioned by the drafters of the future land use map as commercial. The signage issue or the signage point, the maximum size or square footage of signage in a highway business zone is 150 feet. We have the Plano focal point, which contains a recommendation of 8 feet tall, 75 square feet in area. We agreed to scale it down or to limit the square footage of sign area from 150 to 100. The reason we didn't go to 75 ties back into this distance that the property sits off of Scottsville Road, and it simply being a point of signage being visible. These will be, you know, commercial office-type businesses there, and we thought that additional 25 square feet, which is, you know, the difference between a few feet in terms of width and height on the sign, would enhance the commercial marketability of the property, being that it does sit so far off of Scottsville Road and so far above the surface level of Scottsville Road. As far as building materials, we feel like we have addressed those. I think Commissioner Starks, you had a question about buffering. Was that screen? Well, we're talking about mechanicals, units on top of the building.
On the roof.
Right. So it would be screened with materials that would, the same facade that would be used to construct. That's correct. Okay, thank you, sir. I don't have anything else to add. Obviously, if you all have any questions, we'll be happy to answer those. But again, the consistent themes throughout the staff report was the signage and the setback, and those were the things I wanted to at least try to clear up as best I could.
Ted, so I think you've done a good job of addressing the setback issue. I would agree with that. The two remaining are parking and size of sign, and you're exactly right. There is a difference in elevation there. The parking has been allowed in the front. Did your client look at a way to make parking in the rear, or is it just that it just doesn't function well with parking?
I think it's an issue of function. That's probably an engineer question, if Brian can address that. But my understanding of it is just a matter of function with where you had the access point on Scottsville Road.
Mr. Shirley?
Professional address, 1136 South Park Drive. I do swear to tell the truth.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. Yeah, we did look at several options on this, and we did some kind of cross sections, and with that parking being 10 feet higher than what the road is, and then with the landscape, you're really not going to see much of the parking at all. Because if the landscape's maintained at 2 to 3 feet, the view corridor from down at Scottsville Road, that's going to be screening it, plus the elevation change. It's not like some parking lots are sitting down in a hole and you're looking down it, or even straight across. So for functionality and circulation, we want to try to keep some of the parking in the front like we've depicted, just knowing that with the sight lines, the slopes, the elevation change, and the screening is going to be required.
So there will be screening along, let me describe this as best I can, in front of the parking?
We're required to screen that 70%, and half of that has to be evergreens, and hang 2 trees per 100 linear feet.
Thank you.
All right.
Is there any other questions, Mr. Shirley or Mr. Pardue?
If I may, one last question. So your concern with the sign compliance is visibility. So as you pointed out, it's 150 feet, and the focal point asks for 75. You compromised at 100, correct?
Yes, sir.
How did you arrive at that? Is that just an educated guess? This is how much I think it's going to take to make visibility there?
We did. We really, the applicant wanted 150. And, you know, we envisioned 75 feet in terms of sign area, considering the amount of square feet that we have developed and potential number of occupants of the building, and trying to arrive at a way to divide up so to speak, 75 square feet of sign footage. We thought, we could probably get by with 100 and it still be fairly visible from the road, but once you get below that, we had a really hard time envisioning multiple businesses, signs, and those actually, being visible, and that's obviously an issue with folks who may want to operate a commercial business out of that space.
So this question is really for staff. What have we done in the past with regard to, have we strictly enforced the focal point signage, or have we been somewhat lenient with signage for those other businesses?
I think it would be fair to say that you've been somewhat lenient with other businesses in this study area. Yeah.
Good. That's all I have, Tad. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shirley, and Mr. Pardue. Any other questions for the applicants? All right, thank you, Commissioners. Is there anyone in the audience tonight that has a question about this application? Yes, ma'am, if you would approach the microphone, please. And your name?
Angela Dossie,
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Dawsey, your address?
207 Magnum Road.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, forgive me, first time I've been to one of these and lots of questions. But I'm the property that you see on the lower end. So some of the concerns that I still have based on what I've heard, the excavation of the land, it is on a hill. So I'm wondering what the excavation, what that grade may be, and with it being on a hill, that may be protecting the view from Scottsville Road, but what is going to be the view for me and my home and the other people in the subdivision behind us? I'm concerned about lighting. That's a big concern of mine. Right now I have a beautiful vacant field, and now I'm going to have, this parking. So I'm concerned about fencing being put between my property and this property. But again, depending on that excavation and the grade, that would determine the size of the fence that I would request, or, be concerned about with the lighting from not only cars coming in and out, but also just how late those lights may be on in the parking lot and shining in my bedroom window. Additionally, or do I keep going? All right.
You've got 3 minutes.
Okay.
Take as long as you want.
Okay. I'm also interested in what materials may be used on the Scottsville Road side and the other sides for retaining, because again, it is on a hill, and there's quite a grade there down to Magnum and to Scottsville Road. So what materials are going to be used there, and how will that be maintained? And additionally, there's noted that the hours that individuals can be on the property are between 6 a.m. and 11 p.m. That's not a lot of downtime, really. So again, the lighting, I think, could be a huge impact, and the traffic there in that residential area. And I've been told not to mention this, but I feel compelled to do it anyway because there won't be any maybe a change or effect. But already on Magnum Road, because I think of the proximity of the parkway, we're getting a lot of traffic turnarounds in that, and I'm the very first drive when you come in. So people are turning around, and I've lived there 20 plus years, and before me, the original Die Ford Road actually went through the front of my yard, and that road is still there. And a lot of people confuse that for an access point to the Cambridge Grove subdivision behind me, but my big concern is that people will miss that turn on Scottsville Road, and they'll go, oh, we'll turn in here, and then they'll see my road and go, oh, we can just cut through and go through their back parking lot. And what happens is they're going to end up at the top of my property with a big hill on one side and my yard on the other. So again, I just wanted to make that known, and that's a concern. And did I hit everything? Yeah.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dawsey. The questions that she proposed were the grade, the lighting, the fencing, and the hours from 6 a.m. to 6 a.m. in the morning, 11 p.m. and the materials. And
Did have one more thing, the signage. Again, you're talking about increasing that signage size.
okay.
Above what is recommended for the Plano area. And so, again, being on a hill, what are we going to be seeing from the residential side of things? What will our view be? Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Yes, sir. If you'd come to the microphone, please. State your name and address.
John Thomas, 122 Cambridge Grove Circle.
Mr. Thomas, anything else other than what Ms. Dawsey has presented tonight?
Well, the thing that's of concern for us and the rest of the people in Cambridge Grove subdivision is the traffic on Scottsville Road, the ability to exit our neighborhood and turn left when this property is going to have entrance and egress basically into the right turn lane. The right turn lane that's already set there to turn onto Magnum Road. And with the proximity we are to the Parkway, the I-165 entrance there, it's going to be a little bit of difficulty, a lot of extra traffic coming out of that parking lot into the right turn lane while we're trying to get out to go left. And I'm afraid we're going to see more of the new intersections where we all have to turn right coming out of the neighborhood, and that's going to put us past the Parkway to be able to turn around and come back. So I just wondered how much traffic study has been done. Crashkentucky.org shows that there was 36 accidents in that area in the last 1 year, 10 of them with injury. And that's between the Parkway and Buddy Miller Drive. So.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Appreciate your comments. Is there anyone else tonight here that has questions regarding this? Ms. Dawsey or Mr. Thomas, have commissioners any questions for the staff regarding the comments from our audience tonight?
So if we could, let's kind of go through the list here. And lighting, there are requirements for lighting that we don't, I think, put in the DPCs because they are requirements. Is that correct? For our audience members, could we briefly describe what those requirements are?
Sure. So for commercial development, we have different standards for lighting. There's an overall maximum foot candle measurement at the property line. And there's also a requirement that any lighting on the property be directed downward and inward to minimize light trespass onto adjacent properties. And then there are also minimum requirements for parking lot lighting to ensure that the lighting within those areas is going to provide lighting that will be safe for anyone who's parking or walking through those areas.
So prior to this applicant, if this application moves forward, prior to them getting permitting, they would have to submit a lighting plan, and that lighting plan would have to comply with those requirements. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very
And
good.
Rachel, would you address Ms. Dawsey's question about the fencing along the back, or is there a requirement for the fencing?
There is not a requirement for fencing.
Okay.
We have, if you're adjacent to an incompatible use, there are screening requirements, but there are multiple options that you can choose from to meet those minimum screening requirements. An opaque fence is one of the options, but it's not a requirement.
So the applicant has not addressed that tonight.
Well, it wouldn't be addressed until the permitting phase. If this were to move forward, they would be required to submit a landscape plan.
Okay.
And during review of that, the staff would verify that they meet those minimum screening requirements. But again, a fence is not a requirement.
See, so a fence would be an option, but it's not a requirement. They could choose another method for screening, correct?
Correct.
I see, okay.
There another item regarding grading that she?
Yes, I
questioned?
think her other question was regarding grade. I don't know that we we could really address that, because the screening is the primary issue there. Her question was, what am I going to see? And ideally, they are going to see this screening that is installed here. Now, certainly, height of the building, you may see the top of the building or some portion of the building above, but that elevation, I think, is not something that we could state here this afternoon.
The applicant might be able to address that if they've looked at preliminary engineering of the site. They may not have, but that might be something they can address.
Bring the engineer up and see if they.
Brian, would you address that, please?
The site, as it's at the front, it's relatively level and then starts going up. So the residence is going to be a little bit higher in the back. Now, we could have tried to push this further back, but one of the things we're trying to do is be sensitive to what's behind us. We left a whole lot of green space back there. So grade-wise, we're not going to be able to take the grade down much because then we'd be getting into the state right-of-way. It's part of the reason that right-of-way is so wide in that area is when Scottsville Road was constructed, instead of just doing what they sometimes will do, a temporary construction easement, they just went ahead and purchased that entire slope. So, you know, the building is going to be real close to where the existing grade is now, but then again, it does slope up further in the back. And we do have the options of different landscape in the back, either with or without a fence.
So your landscape buffer will be, would it be fair to say that that landscape buffer will be located close to the property line?
I think that's where we'd prefer to put it.
On the
That would
back,
have-
on the backside.
Right, and it would have the best impact for the adjacent property owner when they're looking down to the site. If we pulled it all the way down right next to the parking lot in the back, they're gonna be looking right over top of it. So if we put it on the rear property line or close to it within 10 feet, that's gonna provide the best actual visual buffer.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks.
Is there anyone else in the audience tonight that has a question regarding this application? And appreciate everybody being here tonight, taking time to, for this application. Is there anyone else here tonight that has a question? Hearing none, then would call for a motion, please.
Make a motion to approve the proposed zoning map amendment together with and condition upon a general development plan docket number 2022-51Z County, based upon the testimony and documents presented in this public hearing. The proposed zoning map amendment is consistent with the adopted Focus 2030 comprehensive plan as demonstrated by its compliance with the objective and action items presented in the staff report. Therefore, the proposed zoning map amendment is in agreement with the adopted comprehensive plan. Further request that this motion include a summary of evidence and testimony presented by the witnesses at this public hearing.
Second.
Commissioner Gay?
Ma'am.
Commissioner Graham?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Starks?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Vitale? Commissioner Volker?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Drain? Yes, ma'am. And Chair Warren?
Yes, ma'am. The motion is approved and will go to the Warren County Fiscal Court for final approval. Is there any new business tonight, Mr. Peterson? There are no other discussion items. We stand adjourned. Thank you all for being here tonight.
They show how many